Welcome to the Magic and Arts Alliance, a portal into the living world of occult creativity. I'm your host, Katherine Del Rosso, a musician, artist, and professional tarot reader who has traveled to more than 20 countries in order to learn from and practice magic with witches, magicians, and visionary artists. In each episode, I sit down for intimate, in-depth conversations with creators who weave mysticism into their work. Together we explore topics like tarot, the Lima, Qabalah, astrology, and alchemy, and the many ways which magic is interwoven with writing, music, visual art, and poetry. Whether you're just beginning your path or deepening your practice, the Magic and Arts Alliance welcomes you into the circle where the esoteric meets the creative. Check, check. Okay,
well, here's the real question. Are we going to go and use our best customer service voices the whole time? Isn't that really what radio podcast voices are?
Yeah. I know. I definitely, when I tried to make videos just of, maybe I was like trying to sell music lessons or something, I found myself putting on this fake announcer kind of voice. And it felt really icky when I went back and looked at it. So I'm going to try to keep this more like a conversation.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So this is the second episode of the Magic and Arts Alliance podcast. And the topic we're discussing today is Hermetic Qabalah. Our first episode was on the topic of Jewish Qabalah. And now we're going to use Hermetic Qabalah as sort of a launching point to really start talking about magic a little more. So the guest that I've invited today is Atlanta's own DJ Ghost, aka Bobby Creech. He's a well-known DJ here in Atlanta. He's an occultist. Bobby was very welcoming to me when I showed up in the community and expressed my interest in magic. And he's going to share with us some high-level information today about Qabalah. I'm a beginner, and I'm surely a lot of the people listening to this podcast are also beginners, and we know little to nothing about magic and Qabalah. So I guess where we can kind of start is just talking about, now that we're actually talking about magic, right, what is magic? And clearly we're not talking about, sleight of hand and pulling rabbits out of hats. But, so...
Yeah, what is that definition from Aleister Crowley? The...
art and science?
Of application of will... or I'm messing it up.
First question, yeah. I stumped you. You know what?
I don't necessarily go and stick strictly to it. I think that's a good, useful definition to use. Yeah. I think it's about how we can go and use intentionality to shift our own reality. Mm-hmm. And even saying that, I feel a little silly and douchey. Like, what does that mean? Is that a bunch of buzzwords? If I had to go and be like more conversational about it, it would be, how is it that I go and shift probabilities in what I'm doing? When I'm talking about it from the standpoint of art and Qabalah, it's about looking at things in a symbolic framework. Maybe if you're old enough to remember card catalogs, how is it that things are categorized? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I do remember going and reading Crowley as a kid and it having this impact on me that creating a painting, writing a speech, performing a song, performing a rousing speech, these things are no different than wiggling your fingers and saying an incantation. And like that these things are magic.
Wow, that's great. I love it. You kind of cut straight to the point, right? Because what we were discussing in a larger context is how do magic and art, work together, or can they be used? Can you use magic to create art? Is creating art magic itself?
Absolutely, it is. It is no different. There is no division in my mind. They are the one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
It may just be how we think about it when we go and talk about there being some sort of division, but I don't see there being any difference between the two.
So you can be fairly creative when you're creating your own rituals or
Mm-hmm.
performing rituals
Right.
that were already written. I think a lot of people, when we get started doing magic, a lot of people go on, these days, right, then we go on Google and be like, how do I get Susie down the street to fall in love with me? Right?
I mean, that's absolutely why probably like 90% of people start looking into magic, is because they want to feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
If it's talking to Susie, it's, and getting her interested and pursuing a romantic endeavor, it's generating that confidence. Or getting money or prestige or recognition. It's that I'm reminded of like that mentality of around like, oh, I'm going to start meditating and become so enlightened, and that's trashy and silly and egotistical.
Sure.
But that's the starting. It's real. That's
right.
The starting point for people.
Yeah. Okay. So
that our intentions don't have to start off as noble and high-minded and pure.
For sure. I mean, why would they? We're humans, right?
Yeah, we're
That's a good
coming
point.
from wherever we're starting. And when it comes to thinking of art as magic and them not being any different, think about the books you've read that moved you and then inspired you to go and create your own art.
Mm-hmm.
Or when you've looked at a painting and it's inspired you, and or just on the simplest level,
Mm-hmm.
you look at a piece of art and it moves you.
That's right.
That's magic.
Yeah.
That not oh, it's so magical. Literally, that is magic.
So
That is magic.
I love that you said that, because for me, being a musician, I've really started to understand in the last year especially that how magical music really is and how important it is to me spiritually. And sometimes I wonder why I'm even doing anything else. Because I have the most powerful magic that I know of that I've ever experienced in music. But I still have a curious mind and I still want to learn about... It's just cool. Occultism, esotericism, so many different categories of research and study fall under this umbrella. And going back to my example about someone going online and Googling a spell, I kind of feel like a lot of people, or at least in my generation, where we started with magic was with Wicca. That
Sure.
seems to be the most popular. If you start talking about magic or being a witch, it seems as though most people are familiar with Wicca.
Right. The two, paganism, magic, and Wicca, they're all kind of synonymous with one another, which speaks to how Gerald Gardner and the early Wiccans were marketing themselves in a very effective way. Whatever we may think of them, 70, 80 years on, however long it's been, or wherever you go and put that starting point. But definitely, like, going and looking at Gerald Gardner and him trying to go and get into the popular conscious and using media to get recognized, and how I can think of that picture of Gerald Gardner squatting down in a circle with like a paper mache doll that looks like, a little gremlin, goblin, gargoyle thing, and he's pointing at it with a wand. Like that's evocative. I would maybe argue, or to get lost into the weeds, I would go and describe that as like a glamour, but it's still magic, and it helped. Those kinds of things help to go and carry magic on, and it's how Wicca is still synonymous with magic, witchcraft, and paganism.
Okay, so there are so many different types of magic that we could really go down a rabbit hole talking about them, and I kind of want to bring it back to Qabalah. So one of the reasons why I chose Qabalah as a topic is because it does touch many different types of magic.
Yeah, it does.
Can you talk a little bit about the ones that you know of?
Oh, let's see. Yeah, Hermetic Qabalah, and I would say that I have seniority and experience as opposed to saying that I'm an expert on it.
Okay.
Like I've been doing it for a long time. I started looking into it about 25 years ago, maybe a little longer. Yeah, a little longer. And I've been familiarized with it. But, if you want me to go and tell you the color correspondence that goes with the sphere of Netzach, you're going to stump me. But I can go and tell you that how magic and Hermetic Qabalah work together is this idea of correspondences. Things correspond to other things, and that there's magic within that. So, that feeling of getting a swelling in your chest when you hear a really moving piece of music, you can correspond that to the heart chakra, anahata. You can correspond that to colors that go with that within chakra systems. You can correspond that also, and this is within Hermetic Qabalah, arguably, at least definitely modern contemporary. You can correspond that to the sphere of Tiferet or Tifereth, or however you want to pronounce it, which is, that word literally means beauty, and corresponds to this idea that goes along with that. You could correlate that to the concept of the sun in Hermetic Qabalah, and all these different ways to go and break that down. There are astrological correspondences that would go along with that. Many different ways of tying that into the idea of the sun. But it's also how Leo is associated with the sun. It's also tied in with the tarot card of, if we're talking about the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, just to kind of keep it like simple. It would be the strength card, and then there's numerological ideas that get tied into this, and there's lots of different numbers you can go and argue, or different systems that you're potentially going to go and use, but there's numerology that goes and gets tied into all of this as well. So all these things like interlink. Now, how does this have to do with art? If we're using the numerology I'm trying to go and keep this really simple.
Okay, thank you.
And so, because this example and metaphor might be crude, it might not be exactly right, but hopefully it conveys the idea. So you have the number of 6 associated with Tiferet and with the sun. And so if you're trying to tie these things into artwork or for music, maybe you're going and looking at Neoplatonic ideas of what key that would be in for something that's very solar and uplifting, or what kind of solar artwork, what colors would correspond with that if you're trying to go and convey that with the album artwork, if you want to go and make it a project, or you take the idea of how the sun moves through the sky through the course of a day, and you incorporate that into the themes within the songs on an album.
Wow, cool.
I would... Hermetic Qabalah, I think, is largely focused in on this idea of correspondences, if I had to try and go and describe it. And we can, get lost into...
I'm going to edit that out.
Sure.
Or maybe I won't. Okay. So, I just interrupted you. But I feel like you answered the question really well. And so I'm gonna ask another question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But Hermetic Qabalah is about how we look at how reality and symbolism interface with one another through the concepts of correspondences.
Wow. And so, okay, that's so interesting. So, if you were working with a particular Sephira, right, for a particular purpose, then there would be a number, a symbol, a zodiac sign, maybe plants,
herbs. Yes, absolutely. You can go to amazing lengths to incorporate things.
One of the references that I've been told to look at, if you're interested in finding the correspondences, is the 777, the Aleister Crowley book.
Right. There's also the Stephen Skinner book, whose name escapes me at the moment. But there's lots of different systems within Thelema and within the world of chaos magic and things influenced by Crowley. 777 is a really good starting point. It's almost kind of like a dry academic thing. It's kind of like going in, instead of thinking of it as a book of magic, it's kind of like going and looking at the periodic table,
right?
But for spirituality, and then looking at how we interface with reality.
That's really cool, actually.
Yeah.
So you touched on this a little bit. Okay, so the different... So it sounds like Thelema uses Kabbalah, of course. Wicca, they use Kabbalah? Do you know?
Plenty of forms of Wicca do not... Yeah, simple answer, yes.
Okay.
They do.
And then you mentioned chaos magic.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know much about chaos magic. Here's my understanding about... my very simple and ignorant understanding about right hand and left hand path magic. Right being more like structured, tried and true system of magic, and in the correspondence on the Kabbalah, the right hand column, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Having a male energy, right?
So, yeah. To swing back to what chaos magic is,
okay,
to answer the question, chaos magic is this modern movement that is not religious in the way that Wicca is, or even to a lesser extent, like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Thelema. Chaos magic is about, I guess, to put it in a dry way, it's about going and getting results and seeing how you can manipulate reality around you. And maybe in a less cynical way, it's about being less focused in on religious tradition and dogma, and about going and finding wonder in how you can interface and change the world around you. I think that would be a more romantic way of describing it. It started arguably in the late 80s, early 90s with Peter Carroll and some of his contemporaries. He wrote Liber Null and Psychonaut, and then he had his predecessors.
Austin Osman Spare.
Right, who was a brief student of Crowley's.
A contemporary of Crowley.
They're just look it up.
Yeah, I've got this great book that references both of them. It's a book by Michael William West called Sex Magicians. Have you ever read that book? It's really cool. I'll show it to you.
I'll have to look into that. But yeah, Austin Spare, if we're talking about how magic and art interface in a more pop culture contemporary way, Spare very much had an impact and influence on Jimmy Page from the band Led Zeppelin, to the point where he took some of Spare's magical symbols and adopted them as his own personal identifier and sigil. And it had an impact and an influence on Led Zeppelin's music. I mean, just if somebody has a vinyl record near them and of Led Zeppelin's, there's probably gonna be some sort of occult symbolism on there because of Spare. And Jimmy Page took influence from Spare's processes, which were, graphic. He was doing graphic art, kind of along the lines of Mucha. I can never remember how to say it.
Yeah, I think I've seen the pen and ink drawings. They're really beautiful.
Yeah, very much so. And then Jimmy Page was going and incorporating that into music. And I know I was inspired by Led Zeppelin as a kid.
For sure. When I was I remember being a teenager, and I think the first time I got high on music, it was the Doors. And I still come back to the Doors all the time.
Right.
But definitely Led Zeppelin rang that bell for me as well.
Right. There's so many bands who have been inspired by the occult, and they're dabbling into it, or they're heavy influence into it and deep dive into it. I'm not making fun of people that some would consider to be dilettantes when it comes to the occult. It's just that it's about how we see reality and how we find inspiration to go and create artwork.
Yeah.
I mean, Hall and Oates.
What?
Yeah.
No fucking way.
Yeah. Daryl Hall, to get a little bit, just my background is within Thelema, so there's lots of factoids that I can go and talk about within that. But I'm experienced with and influenced by Golden Dawn, Wicca, all sorts of different forms of the occult and paganism are in my background, from high ceremonial magic to Freemasonic style fraternal order oriented magic to root work and Appalachian folk magic. But if you go and look at Daryl Hall's upper arm on some of the promo photographs of him, the goddess Babylon from the world of Aleister Crowley and Thelema, he has the name Babylon tattooed on his.
Wow.
Is it Babylon or is it a 7-pointed star? He either has the Star of Babylon or the name Babylon tattooed on his upper arm. I can't remember or it might be both. I'm
Can you tell
drawing
us?
a blank.
Can you tell us a little bit about Babylon? I'm sure. Might even be a whole nother episode.
That potentially is a whole other episode to relate that back to Hermetic Qabalah and to art. I would go and say the goddess Babylon within the world of Thelema and post-Thelemic traditions, which I would arguably say that chaos magic is one of those. But there are people who are less interested in Crowley's view of Babylon, but this figure and this idea and this image is so evocative and powerful and seated within, the Western magical tradition. It comes out of the Bible, out of the Book of Revelations. Rather than seeing from like a traditional Protestant worldview as the whore of Babylon out of the Book of Revelation as being evil. I'm trying to think how to describe this. Crowley is one major point of origin of going and seeing the sacred whore figure within Western culture as this rectified figure that accepts everything and everyone and contains all of existence within her because she turns nothing away. It's also a figure that speaks to wantonness and divine madness, or that place of pure inspiration as well would be a way to interpret it. It's a figure metaphorically described through the symbol of a chalice or a cup, going and drawing back to symbolism out of the Book of Revelation. We can go and look at, instead of going interpreting from a Protestant Christian viewpoint as the Book of Revelation as prophetic of a coming ending cataclysmic apocalypse. It's possible to go and interpret this as all symbols that are layered with meaning, beasts with horns. What do horns mean in a symbolic sense? 7 eyes, 7 heads, the number 666, that's, so scary and evil. Again, if we go and look at this from the standpoint of interpreting the numerology behind it, or from a Kabbalistic standpoint, the gematria. And then also something to go and point out, I was talking with my wife about on my way over here, is that Kabbalah, Jewish traditional Kabbalah, it's roughly about 1,000 years old. Not as old as some people may realize. That's still pretty stinking old. But it had its antecedents. You had the various different Jewish diasporas and Jewish folk working as merchants throughout the Mediterranean in the ancient world of the Roman Empire, and coming into interaction with Greek ideas around numerology as well. It's called, within ancient Greek and Christian spirituality of the ancient world, isophinia. This idea of letters having numerological values and this having a spiritual component to it.
That's definitely something that is intriguing. Something about the way the way that words have deeper meanings when you associate their numerological, I don't know, value.
Right.
Whatever. I know nothing about that other than what I just said. So that's definitely a topic I will want to get into another time.
Yeah, the topic of Babylon is big and complicated, but we can look at it from a Kabbalistic standpoint of the book of Revelation and looking at the symbolism in there around her, and then Crowley's later innovations with regards to the Enochian angelic system of John Dee and Edward Kelly, which was this apocalyptic angelic magic. It's a rabbit hole or a very deep cup to go and fall down into. But there's all this symbolism around Babylon of if we're looking on the Tree of Life, we have Binah, we have the Saturn symbolism around her. This may be, some personal interpretations coming from my own personal gnosis and work with Babylon. But I think it's if we're getting artistic and taking some license, Binah is the great sea. And if Babylon, is seated in Binah, then she is the great sea as well. Or of all this if I'm using symbolism from the tarot, cup symbolism, the ace of cups in some ways. I'm getting a little bit lost here in the metaphors, which happens when you start working with Hermetic Qabalah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Honestly, I'm following you though. No worries. It's just like you said, there's so many correspondences that I think I asked a really big and hard question because there's no way to pull up all of the different correspondences and put it all together in your mind in one easy way right now.
But that's about the kind of some of the inspiration and the divine madness that I was talking about comes along with
divine madness.
Babylon in some ways.
Ooh, that's really interesting.
Of drunkenness and wantonness. And so I would argue that if we're looking at this in the biggest way possible of the metaphor of the Great Sea is water as being a metaphor for emotions, and her being kind of this hyperfocal inflection point for trying to go and have a way for our, primate, human monkey minds to go and understand how we interface with emotions or things that are big and overwhelming. And she's, in a crude way, a metaphor for this, but a living thing at the same time that we can interface and interact with.
Ooh, I love that. That is really well said, Bobby.
Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Okay. Is there anything else that you think beginners who are interested in Kabbalah should check out, or anything that you wanted to mention that you didn't?
From a beginning standpoint, Kabbalah can be very intimidating and not very sexy. I don't know about everyone, but many people will come to see that glyph of the Tree of Life that has the 10 circles that are interconnected with 22 lines. and they just see a whole bunch of memorization, which may be intimidating or may also be very appealing.
Okay.
But it's this idea of going and creating structure on how to look at spirituality and how one frames their relationship to reality.
Great. I'm glad you said that, because when I started studying occultism, which wasn't that long ago, I was pretty immediately overwhelmed with all of the different fields of study and all the depth of each one. And I really didn't know where to start, and there was no framework that I knew of. But I think that's where Kabbalah can really be a great starting point for magicians. It gives you a framework. So thank you.
To the beginner out there, I would have them go and look at some of the classics. Dion Fortune. I'm sure there's some people that'll moan and wail when I go and mention Israel Regardie. I think that it's still good material. It can be really, really bone dry, but I would still say that it's foundational. Can't go wrong with looking at some of the other material out there, Sefer Yetzirah. I'm a fan of Crowley, and you mentioned the book 777 before, and the accompanying essays. I think the essays are really powerful to go and read on how to look at all these different correspondences and how they can go and shape how we look at reality. I'm a big proponent of being practical with things and getting in and working with it. So look at what some of the tables of correspondences say, how things are correlated. Go and light a green candle and stare at it for a while and sit and meditate. Pull out the incenses that are paired on the same line and those tables of correspondences. See what images and ideas start to pop to mind when you're going and burning that incense and burning that color candle. Things that can go and be practical and simple to approach, starting out, to go and make it a little bit more tangible and not so abstract or bookish.
Great. I think that's some advice that I've received before, and I started to follow it, and I really agree. I like that advice. Thank you.
When it comes to, say, music, we can go and I talked about like album artwork. We can also use these things in like stage shows or what clothing we wear to help go and build an idea within ourselves and within the audience.
I love that.
What key a song is being played in, you can go and interpret this also as like what time measure you're using. Working as a DJ, what lyrical material or what the song titles are. Trying to go and think about, like, I try to think of DJ sets as rituals in a very, very broad sense,
okay.
in a very abstract sense. So I'll go and look at song lyrics or song titles and try and go and pull together some kind of through line throughout it. When I'm trying to go and build up an idea, and I'll talk to like the lighting tech and ask them to go and stick to like a particular color or whatever.
That's cool.
And the times where I've gone and put a lot more thought and effort into that, it does pay out, as opposed to just like picking a handful of random songs and DJing something and just picking what are the most popular songs of a particular time. I remember my mentor passed away at the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm sure a lot of people can go and relate to how that cut us off from grieving and so forth, and she and I worked together. Not only was she my mentor within the magical arts and the occult, we also worked together in nightclubs for quite a long time. And so it was last summer was the second anniversary of her passing. Third anniversary of her passing, and so I decided I was going to go and build a set around, just loosely around the idea of songs that she cared about, themes of moving through heartbreak that were really important to her, and then just this idea of transcending grief and finding meaning in grief into a set and trying to keep it abstract. I understand that this is all anecdotal, but I will remember that DJ set for years to come. And these people never heard me mention her name over the microphone. I was just DJing, and we played with the lights a little bit in a slightly different way. And we had people literally climbing onto one another's shoulders and dancing around and whooping and chanting, and there's this like visceral experience that particular night at the masquerade at that event that'll stick with me for a long time, and I was trying to go and find a way to honor somebody in a very abstract sort of way, and try and go and incorporate some magic into it, and it was DJing Wicca Wicca Wicca.
So you do have experience with Wicca.
Oh, that was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Yeah.
I'm really just happy to get a chance to sit and talk with you, and I feel like you did a phenomenal job. I think that for someone who knows nothing about magic, this could be a really good starting place.
I thought you were gonna like quiz me on different emanations.
Were you ready? Did you study? Were you ready for that?
Kingdoms and layers and like the neshama this and the goof. I thought we were gonna get like technical.
No. Okay, Bobby. Well, do you have any events, or do you have any artists or organizations that you want to promote or mention to the listeners?
I don't have any upcoming events currently at the moment. I encourage anyone and everyone to go look for magical organizations in your area. Pull together some courage, go and talk to them. I encourage everybody to go and look at initiatory traditions and to get involved in a group and help go and build community, and that magic happens through synergy and interfacing with and building community with other people. Be that the OTO, be that your local Wiccan coven, the Golden Dawn, whomever. And I encourage people to go and look into those things. If you're in the Atlanta area, big fan of the OTO, Dove and Serpent Oasis, great people. Briefly dipping back to my mentor and her passing, she succumbed to alcoholism And I want to encourage anybody who might have substance abuse problems and who's been thinking about going and getting help, go and do that. Go talk to a therapist. There's smart recovery. There's Dharma recovery. If you're, feel more comfortable with Buddhist things, there's pagans in recovery. Big proponent of them. Of course, Alcoholics Anonymous and other similar 12-step groups. Want to, just in honor of her memory and her passing, want to encourage people who might be pagan and magic oriented to go and look at www.pagansinrecovery.com or .org, pagansinrecovery.org.
Got it.
I'll go and plug that. Without, getting into the whole anonymity thing or whatever. I just want to encourage people to go and look at and know about those resources.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again, Bobby. And I would definitely want to have another interview with you at some point. Perhaps when I'm living abroad, we could do a Zoom call.
Yeah. If we're going to talk about Babylon, I'll have to go and pull together some resource materials for that one as well.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. If you'd like to be a guest on this podcast, or if you would like a personalized tarot reading, please check out my website, thecardwitch.com, THECARDWITCH.com. Thank you for listening.